A single mom is hired to teach Braille to a millionaire's blind son. The kid, broken by his loss and blindness, pushes away any help. In a fit of anger, he reveals a secret about his father. If this story got you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from. The alarm clock rang with its familiar harsh tone, and Sarah Mitchell's hand reached out instinctively to silence it before it woke Tommy. The small apartment on the outskirts of Boston was quiet, except for the distant sound of cars passing on the main road. Dawn was breaking, casting a soft glow through the thin curtains that adorned their modest living space. Sarah pushed herself up, her body aching from another restless night spent grading papers. At 34, she looked older than her years, the weight of responsibility etching fine lines around her eyes. Her gaze fell on the pile of unpaid bills on the kitchen table, a constant reminder of the financial tightrope she walked daily. "Mom?" Tommy's voice called from the adjacent room. "Is it morning already?" Sarah's face softened immediately. "Yes, honey, time to get up. I've got your clothes laid out on the chair by your bed." She heard the familiar rustle as her 11-year-old son navigated his way around the room, his hands tracing the familiar path from bed to chair. Tommy had been born without sight, but what he lacked in vision, he made up for in spirit. His smile could light up even the darkest days, and Sarah drew strength from his unwavering optimism. "Do you have Mrs. Wilson's daughter today?" Tommy asked, his fingers deftly buttoning his shirt. "Yes, and then the Peterson twins at 4, Sarah replied, preparing a simple breakfast of toast and scrambled eggs. "Mrs. Gonzalez is picking you up after school to take you to your piano lesson, remember?" Teaching special needs children had never been Sarah's plan. With a master's degree in education psychology, she had once dreamed of working in research, developing new methodologies for children with learning disabilities. But life had other plans. When Tommy was born, she had to recalibrate, taking on private tutoring jobs that allowed her a flexible schedule to care for him. The pay was inconsistent and barely covered their expenses, but Sarah refused to compromise on Tommy's education. He attended a prestigious school for visually impaired children, a financial strain that left little room for luxuries but gave her son the opportunity to thrive. "Mom, can I go to Jake's birthday party on Saturday?" Tommy asked, his fingers skillfully navigating his breakfast plate. Sarah hesitated. "I'm not sure, honey. I might have to pick up an extra session with Mrs. Wilson's daughter." Tommy's face fell slightly, but he nodded with understanding beyond his years. "It's okay. I can ask Mrs. Peterson if she can take me. She offered last time." Sarah felt the familiar pang of guilt. Tommy never complained, never asked for more than what she could give, but she knew he deserved better. A childhood filled with birthday parties and playdates, without the constant shadow of financial worry. After dropping Tommy off at school, Sarah headed to her first tutoring session of the day. Mrs. Wilson's 7-year-old daughter, Emily, had Down syndrome and needed extra help with reading comprehension. The session went smoothly, but as Sarah was preparing to leave, her phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. "Hello? Is this Sarah Mitchell?" a deep male voice inquired. "Yes, this is she," Sarah replied, balancing her phone between her shoulder and ear as she packed her teaching materials. "My name is Ethan Brooks. I was given your name by the Boston Institute for Special Education. I understand you specialize in teaching children with visual impairments." Sarah paused. Her curiosity piqued. "Yes, that's correct. I've been working with visually impaired children for over a decade. I need a private tutor for my son, Alex. He's 12 years old and he recently lost his sight in an accident." The man's voice faltered slightly. "He's struggling to adjust, and his school recommended getting someone who can help him learn Braille and other adaptive skills." Sarah sat down, giving the conversation her full attention. "I'm sorry to hear about your son. Adjusting to vision loss can be challenging, especially for a child. The school mentioned you have a son who's blind from birth. They thought you might have a unique perspective that could help Alex." Sarah considered her already packed schedule. "Mr. Brooks, I'd be happy to help, but I should mention that my schedule is quite full at the moment. I understand your time is valuable, Ms. Mitchell. I'm prepared to offer double your usual rate." triple if necessary. Money isn't an issue. Finding the right person for Alex is. Sarah's breath caught. Triple her rate would mean she could pay off some of the mounting medical bills from Tommy's recent checkups, maybe even start a small savings account for his future. Would it be possible for you to come to our home in Beacon Hill for an initial meeting? Perhaps tomorrow afternoon, Ethan Brooks continued. I want Alex to meet you before we make any decisions. Beacon Hill, one of Boston's most affluent neighborhoods. Sarah had passed through its cobblestone streets and admired its beautiful townhouses, never imagining she would have a reason to visit. Yes, I could come around 4 tomorrow, Sarah replied, mentally rearranging her schedule. Could you tell me a bit more about Alex? What grade is he in? Has he started learning Braille yet? Alex is in 7th grade. He was a straight-A student before the accident 6 months. He hasn't been back to school since then, and no, he's refused to learn Braille. Ethan paused again, and Sarah could hear the strain in his voice. He's having a hard time accepting his new reality. Sarah recognized the pain in his voice, not just a father worried about his son's education, but a man grappling with a situation he couldn't control. Mr. Brooks, I understand this is difficult. I'll do my best to help Alex, but I want to be upfront with you. This will take time and patience. Time and patience I have, Miss Mitchell. What I lack is the knowledge to help my son through this. That's why I need you. After ending the call, Sarah sat in her car, processing what had just happened. The opportunity was unexpected but potentially life-changing, yet she couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Teaching a child who had recently lost his sight would be very different from working with Tommy or her other students who had been blind from birth. There would be grief, anger, and resistance to overcome. That evening, as she helped Tommy with his homework, Sarah mentioned the potential new student. Do you think you can help him, Mom? Tommy asked, his fingers pausing on the Braille text. Sarah smiled, ruffling her son's hair. I hope so, honey. Sometimes people who can see and then lose their sight have a harder time adjusting than people like you who've never seen. They know what they're missing. Tommy nodded thoughtfully. If anyone can help him, it's you. You're the best teacher in the world. His unwavering faith in her abilities brought tears to Sarah's eyes. We'll see, Tommy. This might be a good opportunity for both of us. That night, after Tommy was asleep, Sarah researched Ethan Brooks. He was a prominent real estate developer, known for his luxury waterfront properties in Boston's booming market. The few articles she found mentioned the tragic car accident that claimed his wife's life and left his son severely injured. The most recent piece, dated 6 months ago, briefly noted that the boy had lost his sight, but offered no further details about his recovery. As Sarah finally turned off her laptop and prepared for bed, she couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. Meeting Ethan Brooks and his son could be the beginning of significant change for her and Tommy, a glimpse of hope in a life that had become a constant struggle for stability. But something told her that this opportunity would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine, challenging not just her professional skills, but her emotional boundaries as well. With both anticipation and apprehension swirling in her mind, Sarah finally drifted off to sleep, unaware that her life was about to change in ways she could never have predicted. Sarah stood before the imposing brownstone townhouse in Beacon Hill, its pristine facade a stark contrast to her modest apartment building. She straightened her simple navy dress, the most professional outfit she owned, and took a deep breath before pressing the doorbell. The sound echoed inside, followed by approaching footsteps. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman in her housekeeping uniform. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Brooks is expecting you. Please come in. The interior was even more impressive than Sarah had imagined. High ceilings, ornate moldings, and a sweeping staircase that led to the upper floors. Original artwork adorned the walls, and the gleaming hardwood floors were partially covered by what Sarah recognized as hand-woven Persian rugs. It was beautiful, yet there was a coldness to the space, as if it were more a showcase than a home. Ms. Mitchell. A deep voice drew her attention to the doorway of what appeared to be a study. Ethan Brooks was tall, with broad shoulders and the confident posture of a man accustomed to commanding attention. His dark hair was streaked with premature gray at the temples, and his face, though undeniably handsome, bore the strain of recent hardship. His blue eyes were sharp, evaluating, but there was a weariness behind them that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for inviting me." Sarah extended her hand, which he shook firmly. "Please, call me Ethan. Would you like some coffee before I introduce you to Alex?" As they sat in the elegant living room, Sarah noted the absence of personal touches. No family photos, no children's drawings pinned to the refrigerator. It was as if the house had been meticulously designed to reveal nothing about its occupants. "I should warn you," Ethan said, his voice low and serious. "Alex isn't receptive to new people these days. He's been through a lot, and he's still processing. Everything that happened. The accident was 6 months ago, but sometimes it feels like it was yesterday." Sarah nodded. "Can you tell me more about what happened? It might help me understand what Alex is going through." Ethan's gaze drifted to the window overlooking the manicured garden outside. "We were driving back from a weekend at our lake house. A drunk driver crossed into our lane. My wife, Claire, she didn't survive the impact. Alex was in the back seat. He had severe head trauma and multiple fractures. The doctors weren't sure if he'd make it at first." His voice remained controlled, but Sarah could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes, in the tightness of his jaw. "When he woke up 2 weeks later, we discovered that the impact had damaged his optic nerves. The doctors say it's permanent. No chance of recovery." "I'm so sorry," Sarah said softly, realizing the full weight of what this family had endured. Alex was a bright, active kid before the accident. Soccer, chess club, science competitions. He did it all. Now he refuses to leave the house. He won't learn Braille, won't use a cane, won't even talk to the specialists we've brought in. It's like he's just waiting, as if his sight will suddenly return if he holds out long enough. "Denial is a common response," Sarah explained gently. "He's not just coping with blindness, he's grieving the loss of his mother and the life he knew." Ethan nodded, a flash of vulnerability crossing his face before his composed expression returned. "I've tried everything. The best doctors, therapists, specialists from around the country. Nothing works. He's slipping away and I don't know how to reach him." "Where is Alex now?" Sarah asked. "In his room. He spends most of his time there. It's the only place he can navigate confidently." Ethan stood up. "I should introduce you, just don't be discouraged if he's not welcoming." They climbed the stairs to the second floor and Ethan knocked on a closed door. "Alex, there's someone here I'd like you to meet." Silence. "Alex, please, just a quick hello. She's come specifically to meet you." "I didn't ask for another specialist," came a bitter voice from inside. "Tell her to go home." Ethan's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly before he straightened again, pushing the door open. "Alex, this is Ms. Mitchell. She's going to be your new tutor." The room was spacious but dimly lit, with heavy curtains drawn across the windows. A boy sat on the edge of the bed, his posture defiant despite the uncertainty in his movements. Alex Brooks had his father's strong features, but his face was thinner, paler, marked by the ordeal he'd endured. His eyes, a striking blue like his father's, stared vacantly ahead. "Hello, Alex," Sarah said warmly. "It's nice to meet you." "Whatever my dad's paying you, it's a waste of money," Alex replied flatly. "I don't need a tutor." Sarah didn't take the bait. "Actually, I think you do, unless you've figured out how to read your science textbooks in the dark." Alex's expression registered surprise at her directness, before hardening again. "I'm not learning Braille. I'm not going to be blind forever." Sarah moved further into the room, taking a seat in a chair near, but not too close to, Alex's bed. "The specialists at the hospital told you the damage is permanent, didn't they?" "Doctors are wrong all the time," Alex shot back. "There are new treatments being developed. Stem cells, gene therapy." "You're right," Sarah interrupted. "Medical science is advancing every day. But while you're waiting for a miracle cure, you're missing out on your life. 7th grade won't wait for you, Alex." The boy's jaw clenched. "What do you know about it? You have no idea what it's like to suddenly lose everything." "You're right. I don't," Sarah admitted. "But my son does know what it's like to navigate the world without sight. He was born blind, and he's never let it stop him from doing what he loves. That's different, Alex argued. He doesn't know what he's missing. Sarah leaned forward slightly. No, but he knows what he has. Friends, school, piano lessons, a life full of experiences that don't depend on sight. Being blind isn't a prison sentence, Alex, unless you make it one. I think that's enough for today, Ethan interjected, sensing his son's growing agitation. Sarah stood up. I'll come back tomorrow at 4. We'll start with some basics. Nothing complicated, just orientation exercises to help you move around. More confidently. Don't bother, Alex muttered. Ignoring his comment, Sarah continued, I also want you to meet my son, Tommy. He's a year younger than you, but I think you two might have a lot in common. As Ethan showed her out, he paused at the front door. He wasn't always like this. Before the accident, he was kind, curious, full of life. He still is, Mr. Brooks. He's just buried those parts of himself for now. Our job is to help him find them again. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that spoke of countless moments of frustration and helplessness. Do you really think you can reach him when no one else has been able to? Sarah considered the question carefully. I don't have a miracle cure, if that's what you're asking. What I do have is experience, not just as a teacher, but as a mother to a blind child. I've spent 11 years helping my son navigate a world that wasn't designed for him. I can't promise overnight success, but I can promise persistence. Something in Ethan's expression shifted, a cautious hope replacing the resignation. That's more than anyone else has offered. When can you start? I need to rearrange some of my other tutoring sessions, but I could start tomorrow. 3 days a week to begin with, more if Alex responds well. Name your price, Ms. Mitchell, whatever you need. Sarah named a figure that was triple her usual rate, half expecting him to negotiate. Instead, Ethan nodded without hesitation. Consider it done. I'll have my assistant draw up a contract. As Sarah drove home, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. The broken family she'd just met presented a professional challenge unlike any she'd faced before. Alex's resistance would be difficult to overcome, but beneath his anger, she had glimpsed a frightened boy desperate for stability in a world that had been turned upside down. That evening, as she prepared dinner, Sarah told Tommy about Alex. He sounds sad, Tommy remarked, setting the table with practiced precision. Is his dad nice? Sarah considered the question. He's complicated. I think he's doing his best in a very difficult situation. Like you did when Dad left? The innocent question caught Sarah off guard. Tommy rarely mentioned his father, who had walked out when facing the reality of raising a blind child proved too much for him. Yes, honey. Something like that. But Mr. Brooks didn't choose to leave. He lost his wife in a terrible accident. Tommy nodded thoughtfully. Maybe Alex needs a friend more than a teacher. Sarah smiled, once again struck by her son's emotional intelligence. You might be right. Would you be willing to meet him someday? I think it could help him to meet another kid who understands what he's going through. Sure, Tommy agreed easily. I can show him all the cool gadgets I use for school, and maybe he likes video games too. I have those audio ones that don't need sight to play. Later that night, Sarah sat at her small desk researching teaching strategies for newly blind adolescents. Her notes quickly filled several pages, and she found herself more energized by this new challenge than she had been in years. There was something about the Brooks family that had touched her deeply. A father desperately trying to rebuild a life for his son, and a boy locked in a prison of grief and denial. As she finally turned off her laptop, Sarah knew that helping Alex would require more than just professional skills. It would demand patience, creativity, and emotional resilience. The walls he had built around himself wouldn't come down easily, and breaking through them would be a challenge unlike any she had faced before. But for the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that went beyond day-to-day survival. This opportunity could change everything, not just financially, but professionally and personally as well. With a mixture of determination and trepidation, she prepared for what promised to be a journey filled with obstacles, revelations, and, perhaps eventually, healing for everyone involved. 3 weeks into Sarah's tutoring sessions with Alex, progress remained painfully slow. Each afternoon in the Brooks mansion felt like a battle of wills, with Alex stubbornly resisting every technique Sarah introduced. Today she had arrived with a tactile map of his bedroom, hoping to help him build confidence navigating his personal space. "I don't need this," Alex said, pushing the map away. "I already know where everything is." "Then show me," Sarah challenged, her patience wearing thin. "Walk from your bed to your desk without touching anything along the way." Alex stood, reluctantly, his movements hesitant despite his claims. He made it halfway across the room before clipping his hip against the corner of his dresser. The impact wasn't hard, but his reaction was explosive. "This is stupid," he shouted, sweeping his arm across the dresser top and sending several items clattering to the floor. "I'm not going to spend my life counting steps and memorizing floor plans." Sarah knelt to gather the fallen items, a phone charger, a watch, some loose change, and placed them back on the dresser. "You're right, Alex. You won't have to do this forever. Eventually, it'll become second nature, just like walking was when you could see." Alex sank back onto his bed, his anger deflating into sullen silence. Sarah sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. "What's the point?" he asked quietly. "Even if I learn all this stuff, Braille, orientation, whatever, I still can't do the things I used to do. I can't play soccer, I can't even read a normal book." "Have you ever tried audiobooks?" Sarah asked. "Tommy loves them. He says the narrators make the stories come alive in a way that's different from reading, but just as good." "Your son was born blind," Alex said, his voice flat. "He doesn't know what he's missing." It was an argument he'd made before, one Sarah struggled to counter because there was some truth to it. Tommy had never experienced the loss that Alex was living with daily. "You know what, I think it's time you met Tommy," Sarah decided. "Would that be okay with you?" Alex shrugged, his face a mask of indifference, but Sarah caught a flicker of curiosity in his expression. "I'll bring him tomorrow. He's been asking about you." Later that afternoon, as Sarah was gathering her materials to leave, Ethan appeared in the doorway of Alex's room. It was unusual for him to be home during their sessions. His work typically kept him at his downtown office until evening. "Ms. Mitchell, could I have a word?" he asked, his voice strained. In his study, Ethan paced, his usual composure noticeably absent. "Is he making any progress at all?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "It's not showing in obvious ways yet, but yes. He started asking questions about how Tommy manages at school. That's a significant step forward. He's beginning to imagine a future where blindness is part of his reality." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as a sign of deep frustration. The school called again. They're asking if he'll be returning after the summer break. His spot at Lakeside Prep won't be held indefinitely. "What do you want, Mr. Brooks?" Sarah asked directly. Ethan looked startled by the question. "What do you mean?" "For Alex. What outcome are you hoping for? Is it about getting him back to that specific school? Or is it about helping him adjust to his new reality in whatever form that takes?" The question seemed to catch Ethan off guard. He sat heavily in his leather chair, suddenly looking exhausted. I want him to be happy again. I want to see him smile, hear him laugh. I want him to have a future that excites him." It was perhaps the most genuine thing he'd said since Sarah had met him, free from the carefully controlled facade he usually maintained. "Then we need to stop focusing on getting back what he's lost and start helping him discover new possibilities," Sarah said gently. "I'm bringing my son Tommy to meet Alex tomorrow. Tommy was born blind, but he lives a full, active life. I think meeting him might help Alex see that blindness doesn't have to define or limit him." Ethan nodded slowly. "If you think it will." "Help?" As Sarah gathered her things to leave, Ethan walked her to the door, an unusual courtesy that suggested he had more to say. "Ms. Mitchell." "Sarah," he began, his formal demeanor slipping slightly. "I know I haven't been particularly involved in these sessions. My work keeps me busy," Sarah finished for him. "I understand. You have a company to run." "That's not the whole truth," Ethan admitted, his voice lower. "Being around Alex, seeing him struggle, it reminds me of everything we've lost. Claire would have known how to help him. She was always the one who could reach him when he was upset or confused. The mention of his late wife caught Sarah by surprise. In the weeks she'd been coming to the house, Claire's name had rarely been spoken, as if the pain of her absence was too great to acknowledge directly. Mr. Brooks, with all due respect, Alex needs his father, not just financially but emotionally. He's lost his mother and his sight. He's afraid of losing you too. Ethan's expression hardened momentarily. Before he nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her words. I'll try to be home earlier tomorrow to meet your son. The next day, Sarah arrived with Tommy, who was excited about meeting Alex despite, or perhaps because of, everything Sarah had told him about the older boy's situation. Remember, she cautioned as they approached the Brooks' doorstep. Alex is still adjusting to being blind. He might be a bit unfriendly at first. Tommy nodded, his face solemn. That's okay, Mum. Dad wasn't very nice when he left either. People get angry when they're scared. The simple wisdom from her 11-year-old son never ceased to amaze. Sarah, Mrs. Reynolds, the housekeeper, greeted them warmly and led them upstairs to Alex's room. To Sarah's surprise, both Alex and Ethan were waiting, the tension between them almost palpable. Alex, this is my son, Tommy, Sarah introduced. Tommy, this is Alex and his father, Mr. Brooks. Hi, Alex, Tommy said brightly, his hand extended in the general direction of Alex's voice. Mum says you just lost your sight recently. That must be super tough. Alex hesitated before reaching out to shake Tommy's hand. Yeah, it sucks. Totally, Tommy agreed with unexpected frankness. Mom says you used to play soccer. I tried that once at school, but I kept missing the ball. The coach put bells inside it, but I still wasn't very good. A ghost of a smile flickered across Alex's face, the first Sarah had seen. I was the team captain. We were undefeated last season. Whoa, that's awesome, Tommy said, genuinely impressed. I'm better at swimming. The lanes have those rope things so I can tell where I'm going. Do you swim? The simple conversation, free from pity or pressure, seemed to disarm Alex. For the next hour, Sarah watched in amazement as Tommy naturally guided Alex through a show and tell of his adaptive devices. A talking watch, a portable Braille note-taker, a smartphone with accessibility features activated. This app is the coolest, Tommy explained, demonstrating a program on his phone. You point it at something and it tells you what it is. Like I can tell if my socks match without asking Mom. Can I try? Alex asked, his first voluntary engagement with any adaptive technology. As the boys continued to explore Tommy's devices, Sarah noticed Ethan watching from the doorway, his expression a complex mixture of emotions, hope, sadness, and something else she couldn't quite name. Your son is remarkable, he said quietly when she approached. So is yours, Sarah replied. This is the most animated I've seen him since we started. Ethan nodded, his eyes never leaving Alex. I've been so focused on what he's lost, on trying to find ways to fix him, that I haven't really been seeing him. Not as he is now. The admission seemed to cost him something, a crack in the carefully controlled facade he presented to the world. Later, as Tommy and Alex were engrossed in an audio-based video game, Sarah and Ethan sat in the adjoining sitting room, where they could hear but not intrude on the boys' interaction. Tommy's father, Ethan began hesitantly. Is he involved in his life? Sarah's smile tightened. No, he left when Tommy was 2. The reality of raising a blind child was too much for him. I'm sorry, Ethan said, genuine empathy in his voice. That must have been difficult. It was at first, but in some ways it was easier after he left. No more arguments about therapies or schools, no more blame when things were hard. Sarah paused, then added, Don't misunderstand. Tommy deserves to have his father in his life. But sometimes absence is less damaging than half-hearted presence. Ethan looked stricken, and Sarah immediately regretted her words. I didn't mean to imply... No, you're right, Ethan interrupted. I've been physically present, but emotionally absent. Alex deserves better. The moment was interrupted by laughter from the bedroom. Alex's laughter. A sound so unexpected that Ethan froze, his eyes widening. I haven't heard that in... "I can't remember the last time," he whispered. The session ended with reluctance, on both boys' parts. Tommy had invited Alex to join him at his piano lesson the following week, an invitation Alex had tentatively accepted with a glance toward his father. "Of course you can go," Ethan had said immediately. "I'll drive you myself." As Sarah and Tommy prepared to leave, Alex asked unexpectedly, "Can we try that Braille thing tomorrow? Tommy says it's not as hard as it looks once you get used to it." Sarah struggled to keep her voice casual. "Sure, we can start with some basic exercises." On the drive home, Tommy was ebullient. "Alex is cool, Mum. He knows all about space and planets. He said maybe we could go to the Science Museum sometime. They have a planetarium with special audio descriptions of the constellations." "That sounds wonderful, honey. I'm glad you two got along." "He's just sad," Tommy observed. "Not mean. He told me he misses his mom a lot. His dad doesn't talk about her, so Alex feels like he's supposed to pretend she never existed." Sarah glanced at her son, once again struck by his perceptiveness. "Did he say that?" Tommy nodded. "When we were playing the game, he said his dad gets all quiet and leaves the room whenever he mentions his mom, so now he doesn't talk about her anymore even though he wants to." The revelation weighed on Sarah as she prepared dinner that evening. The grief that permeated the Brooks household was palpable, but it was the silence around that grief that seemed to be causing the deepest wounds. Alex wasn't just struggling with blindness. He was carrying the burden of his mother's memory alone, unable to share his thoughts or feelings with his father. The next day, when Sarah arrived for their session, she found Alex waiting with a new determination. For the first time, he actively participated in the lesson, running his fingers over the Braille alphabet cards she had brought and repeating the patterns aloud. "Tommy says he can read almost as fast in Braille as kids his age can read print," Alex said as they worked. "Is that true?" "Yes, with practice. The brain is remarkably adaptable." Alex was quiet for a moment, his fingers still tracing the raised dots. Do you think I could learn to play soccer again? Maybe with a ball that has bells in it, like Tommy mentioned?" Sarah's heart swelled with unexpected emotion. "I think that's absolutely possible. There are adaptive sports programs all over Boston. I can look into them if you're interested." Alex nodded, a small but significant gesture of openness to the future. "I'd like that." As their session concluded, Sarah gathered her materials, aware that something fundamental had shifted. The wall Alex had built around himself hadn't come down entirely, but a door had appeared, a willingness to consider life beyond his loss. In the hallway, she encountered Ethan, who had apparently been waiting nearby. "I heard," he said simply. "About the soccer." "It's a good sign," Sarah confirmed. "He's starting to think about possibilities rather than just what he's lost." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've been doing some research. There's an adaptive sports program at Perkins School for the Blind. They have soccer, swimming, even rock climbing." Sarah couldn't hide her surprise at his initiative. "That sounds perfect. I think Alex would—" "Sarah," Ethan interrupted, his voice dropping to a more personal register. Would you, can Tommy like to join us for dinner this weekend? I thought it might be good for Alex to spend more time with Tommy, and I'd like to talk more about these programs, outside of our professional arrangement." The invitation caught Sarah off guard, sending an unexpected flutter through her chest. "That would be nice. Tommy would love it, and so would I." As she drove home, Sarah found herself contemplating the complex dynamics at play. The professional boundary between her and the Brooks family was beginning to blur, evolving into something more personal. It was uncharted territory, potentially fraught with complications, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward helping this fractured family heal, not just as a tutor, but as someone who understood the journey they were on. What had begun as a job opportunity was transforming into something far more significant, a chance to help a wounded boy find his way back to the light, and perhaps to help his father rediscover the courage to face their shared grief together. The summer evening air was warm and fragrant with blooming roses as Sarah and Tommy approached the Brooks mansion for dinner. In the 6 weeks since Sarah had begun working with Alex, the formal townhouse had gradually become more familiar, less intimidating, but tonight felt different. This wasn't a tutoring session, it was a social invitation that blurred the lines between professional and personal. Tommy clutched a small gift bag containing a set of audio adventure books he had selected for Alex. "Do you think he'll like them, Mom? They're my favorites." "I'm sure he will," Sarah assured him, smoothing down her dress, a simple blue sundress she had purchased specifically for the occasion. It had been years since she'd bought anything new for herself, but something about this dinner had felt important enough to warrant the expense. Mrs. Reynolds greeted them at the door with a warm smile. "They're on the terrace. Mr. Brooks has been cooking all afternoon." "Cooking," Sarah echoed, unable to hide her surprise. The housekeeper's eyes twinkled with amusement. He used to cook quite often before. Well, it's good to see him back at it. The terrace was transformed from its usual austere elegance into something more inviting. String lights cast a warm glow over a beautifully set table, and the sound of jazz music floated from hidden speakers. Ethan stood at a grill, looking more relaxed than Sarah had ever seen him in a casual button-down shirt and jeans. "Sarah, Tommy, welcome," he called, setting down his tongs to greet them. "Alex is just getting changed." He insisted on picking out his own clothes for the first time since the accident. The significance of this small act of independence wasn't lost on Sarah. "That's wonderful. He's making real progress." Ethan's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his usually serious face. "All. Thanks to you, and Tommy, of course. Having another kid to talk to has made all the difference, sir." "Mom?" Alex's voice called from the doorway. "Is that you and Tommy?" "We're here," Tommy called back cheerfully. "I brought you something." Alex made his way carefully across the terrace, one hand trailing along the stone balustrade. His movements were more confident than they had been even a week ago, evidence of the hours of practice Sarah knew he'd been putting in. "Here," Tommy said, pressing the gift bag into Alex's hands. "Mum helped me pick them out, but I paid with my own allowance." Alex's fingers explored the bag, finding the books inside. "Audiobooks?" "They're adventure stories," Tommy explained excitedly. "The narrator is awesome. He does different voices for all the characters. The first one is about these kids who discover a hidden cave that leads to another dimension where time works differently." "Tommy," Sarah interrupted gently, "let Alex discover the stories for himself." Alex clutched the books against his chest. "Thanks, I haven't. I haven't read a book since the accident." The simple admission carried the weight of all he had lost, but there was something new in his voice now, not just grief, but a tentative openness to new experiences. Dinner was a revelation. Ethan proved to be an excellent cook, serving grilled salmon with roasted vegetables and a pasta dish that Tommy declared the best ever. The conversation flowed easily, with none of the awkwardness Sarah had feared. Alex shared stories about his previous school, and Tommy talked animatedly about his piano lessons. Ethan asked thoughtful questions about Tommy's experiences navigating school as a blind student, clearly gathering information for Alex's eventual return to education. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to this new version of Ethan, warm, engaged, even occasionally funny. The rigid businessman had been replaced by a father, genuinely trying to connect with his son and their guests. After dessert, a store-bought cheesecake that Ethan apologetically admitted was the extent of his baking skills, Tommy asked to play the grand piano in the living room, a request Ethan happily granted. "He's been taking lessons for 3 years, Sarah explained as Tommy's fingers found the keys, beginning a simple but beautiful melody. "Music has been such a gift for him, something that doesn't require sight to enjoy or excel at." Alex sat beside Tommy on the bench, listening intently. "Could you teach me something basic?" he asked when Tommy finished. "Just a simple tune." The spontaneous request brought tears to Sarah's eyes. It was the first time Alex had voluntarily reached for a new skill, something that hadn't been part of his life before losing his sight. As the boys became absorbed in their impromptu piano lesson, Ethan gestured toward the terrace. "Would you like some coffee? The night is beautiful." Outside, the city lights twinkled below them, and the air had cooled to a pleasant temperature. Sarah accepted a cup of coffee, noting that Ethan seemed nervous, fiddling with his cup in a way that contradicted his usual composure. "I want to thank you," he said finally. "Not just for working with Alex, but for showing me how to be with him. I've been so lost since Claire, since the accident." Sarah nodded, understanding the depth behind his simple words. Grief doesn't come with a manual. Neither does parenting a child through trauma. "No, it doesn't," Ethan agreed quietly. "Claire was always the emotionally intuitive one. I focused on providing financial security, building the business, planning for Alex's future. I thought I was doing my part, but now I realize I was missing the most important thing. Which is? Being present. Really seeing him, not just what I want for him or expect from him." Ethan's gaze drifted toward the house, where the gentle notes of the piano could still be heard. "You do that so naturally with Tommy. He knows beyond any doubt that he's the center of your world." The compliment warmed Sarah deeply. "We're all doing our best with the hands we're dealt. You've provided Alex with every possible advantage, the best medical care, this beautiful home, educational opportunities. But not what he needed most," Ethan said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "Not emotional stability, not a father who could talk about his mother without falling apart." The raw honesty of his statement hung in the air between them. Sarah reached across the table impulsively, placing her hand over his. "It's not too late, Ethan. Alex is still here, still needing you. And from what I've seen these past few weeks, you're showing up for him in ways that really matter." Ethan turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both natural and startling in its intimacy. "I don't think I could have. Found my way without your guidance. Seeing you with Tommy, it's been enlightening." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Sarah found herself acutely aware of the warmth of his hand, the slight calloused texture of his palm against her fingers, the intensity of his gaze in the soft lighting. It had been years since she'd felt this kind of connection with anyone. Years of focusing solely on Tommy's needs, on financial survival, on putting one foot in front of the other. A crash from inside the house shattered the moment, followed by Alex's voice raised in distress. They both rushed inside to find a lamp overturned on the floor, and Alex standing rigid, his face contorted with emotion. "Alex, what's wrong?" Ethan asked, moving quickly to his son's side. "It's just a lamp." "It doesn't matter. Don't touch me," Alex shouted, backing away from his father's approach. "I heard you and Mr. Davidson talking. I heard everything." Ethan froze, confusion etched on his face. "What are you talking about? Mr. Davidson hasn't been here in weeks." "In your study, before the accident," Alex continued, his voice trembling with anger. "You were talking about Mom, about how you were planning to leave, how you'd been seeing someone else." The color drained from Ethan's face, and Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. The accusation hung in the air, massive and awful in its implications. "Alex, you misunderstood," Ethan began, but Alex cut him off. "I didn't misunderstand. You told him you were involved with someone else. Those were your exact words. You were going to leave us, and then Mom. And now you're stuck with me." Alex's voice broke on the last words, tears streaming down his face. Tommy stood nearby, his face reflecting his distress at the unfolding scene. Sarah moved to his side, placing a protective arm around his shoulders. "Alex, that's not what happened," Ethan said, his voice unsteady. "Yes, I was talking to James about another woman, but it wasn't what you think. Your mother knew." "Don't lie to me," Alex shouted. "You're always lying, pretending everything is fine when it's not. Mom is gone, and you don't even care. You probably wish it was me instead of her." The accusation seemed to physically strike Ethan, who staggered back as if he'd been hit. "Alex, no, I would never." But Alex had already turned away, fumbling his way toward the stairs, refusing assistance from Mrs. Reynolds, who had appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Sarah squeezed Tommy's shoulder. "Honey, why don't you go with Mrs. Reynolds to the kitchen for a few minutes? I think Alex and his dad need some time to talk." Tommy nodded solemnly. "Is Alex going to be okay?" "Yes," Sarah assured him, though she felt far from certain. "He's just upset right now. Sometimes people need to let their feelings out, even the hard ones." After Tommy had reluctantly followed Mrs. Reynolds, Sarah turned to Ethan, who stood motionless, his face a mask of anguish. "I should go to him," he said finally, moving toward the stairs. Sarah caught his arm gently. "Give him a moment to calm down first. This has obviously been weighing on him for a long time." Ethan sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. He misunderstood. It wasn't what he thinks. Sarah sat beside him, maintaining a careful distance. "What did he hear, Ethan?" For a long moment, Ethan was silent, his shoulders rigid with tension. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I was planning a surprise for our anniversary, a renewal of vows ceremony. Claire, and I had been going through a rough patch after I spent too much time focused on expanding the business. The woman Alex heard me mention, she was the event planner I hired to arrange everything." The explanation hung in the air, its painful irony unmistakable. But Alex only heard fragments of the conversation, Sarah concluded. Ethan nodded miserably. "Apparently. He must have been passing by my study and heard just enough to misinterpret. I never had any idea. He thought, God, he's been carrying this all these months, believing I was going to abandon him and Claire." The revelation explained so much. Alex's emotional withdrawal, his anger toward his father, the walls he had built not just against his blindness, but against the man he believed had betrayed his mother. "You need to tell him the truth," Sarah said gently. "All of it, even the difficult parts about the rough patch you mentioned. He's old enough to understand that adult relationships have complexities, that people can struggle and still love each other deeply." Ethan looked up, his eyes reddened. "What if he doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm just making up a story to cover the truth?" "Do you have any proof? The event planner's contact information, emails about the ceremony plans, anything that could validate?" "Your explanation?" A flicker of hope crossed Ethan's face. "Yes, in my email. And there's a receipt for the anniversary ring in my office safe. I never had the heart to return it after." Sarah stood up, her teacher's instinct for problem-solving taking over. "Show him. Concrete evidence will help, especially since his trust has been damaged. But more importantly, be emotionally honest with him. Don't hide your grief or your struggle to cope. Let him see that you're human, that you miss Claire too, that you're both trying to find your way forward." Ethan rose as well, a new determination in his stance. "Will you stay? I know it's a lot to ask, especially after what just happened, but Alex trusts you. Having you here might make it easier for him to hear me out." The request crossed another boundary in their evolving relationship, moving Sarah further from tutor to something more integral to the family's healing. She knew she should maintain professional distance, protect herself and Tommy from becoming too emotionally invested in a situation that could still end in countless ways. But looking at Ethan's face, open, vulnerable, asking for help in a way that clearly didn't come naturally to him, Sarah found she couldn't refuse. "I'll stay, but let me talk to him first. Help him calm down so he can really hear what you have to say." Relief flooded Ethan's expression. "Thank you. I don't know what we'd do without you, Sarah." The simple statement carried a weight of meaning that Sarah wasn't ready to examine too closely. She nodded and headed upstairs to Alex's room, where a new phase of their journey was about to begin, one that would either heal the deepest wounds or create new ones that might never fully close. Outside Alex's door, Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. What lay beyond wasn't just a professional challenge, but a pivotal moment for a family in crisis. The revelations of the evening had exposed layers of misunderstanding and pain that had been festering beneath the surface for months. Now, with the truth finally emerging, there was potential for either profound healing or irreparable damage. Taking a deep breath, Sarah knocked gently on the door, preparing to step into a storm of emotions that would test not only her professional skills but her personal boundaries as well. Whatever happened next would change all of them, Alex, Ethan, and perhaps herself most of all. "Alex, it's Sarah. May I come in?" She waited, her hand resting lightly on the doorknob. "Go away." His voice was muffled, thick with tears. "I understand if you don't want to talk, but I'm here if you change your mind." Sarah remained by the door, patient, knowing that pushing would only strengthen his resistance. The silence stretched between them until finally, almost inaudibly, came a single word, "Okay." The room was dark, curtains drawn against the summer evening. Alex sat on the floor beside his bed, knees pulled to his chest, a defensive posture that spoke volumes about his emotional state. Sarah sat beside him, careful to leave enough space that he didn't feel crowded. That was a lot what happened downstairs. Alex remained silent, his jaw set in a rigid line. "Sometimes we hear things that we don't fully understand, especially when we're young," Sarah continued gently. "And our minds fill in the blanks with our worst fears." "I know what I heard," Alex insisted, his voice brittle. "He was talking to Mr. Davidson about being involved with another woman. He said he was making plans to change our family dynamic." "What else could that mean?" Sarah chose her next words carefully. "Have you asked your dad about it directly, before tonight?" Alex shook his head. What was the point? He would just lie. "And then the accident happened, and Mom was gone, and—" His voice broke, unable to continue. "Alex, your father wants to explain. He has a very different understanding of that conversation you overheard. Would you be willing to listen? Just listen, that's all I'm asking." The boy remained silent for several long moments before giving a slight nod. "Fine, but I don't believe anything he says." Sarah moved to the door, opening it to find Ethan waiting anxiously in the hallway. She gave him an encouraging nod as he entered, carrying a laptop and a small velvet box. "Alex," he began, his voice unsteady, "I had no idea you overheard that conversation with James. No idea that you've been thinking all this time that I—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the implication too painful to voice. "Just tell me the truth," Alex demanded, for once. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, close to where Alex remained on the floor. "The woman I was discussing with James wasn't a romantic involvement. She was an event planner named Rebecca Winters. I hired her to arrange a surprise vow renewal ceremony for your mother and me for our 15th anniversary." Alex's posture remained rigid, disbelieving. "Your mom and I had been going through a difficult time," Ethan continued. "I'd been working too much, focused on the Harborview development project. We'd grown distant, and I wanted to do something to show her how much she still meant to me, how committed I was to our family." He opened the laptop, navigating to his email with practiced movements. "Here," he said, turning the screen toward Alex before remembering his son couldn't see it. "I'm looking at emails between me and Rebecca from April, 2 months before the accident. She's sending me venue options and catering menus for the ceremony." Sarah moved closer, describing the emails to Alex. "There's a list of potential locations: the Boston Harbor Hotel, the Public Garden, a yacht on the harbor. There are discussions about flowers, music selections, guest lists." "You could have created those emails any time," Alex said, but his voice held a note of uncertainty now. Ethan opened the velvet box, revealing a platinum ring set with sapphires and diamonds. "This was your mother's anniversary gift. The sapphires match the color of your eyes, both of yours. She always said that was her favorite feature in both of us." He placed the box in Alex's hands, who ran his fingers over the ring inside, his expression flickering between doubt and a desperate wish to believe. "When I talked about changing our family dynamic, I meant refocusing on what mattered, spending more time together, maybe cutting back on work. James was advising me on how to restructure some of my business responsibilities to free up more time." Ethan's voice cracked. "I was trying to fix things, Alex. I loved your mother. I never would have left her, or you." The room fell silent as Alex continued to hold the ring, his fingers tracing its contours. "Why didn't you tell me about any of this after she was gone?" "I could barely talk about her at all," Ethan admitted, his composure finally breaking. "Every memory was too painful. And this ring, these plans, they represented all the things we'd never get to do, all the time I'd wasted working when I should have been with her. With both of you." For the first time, Alex heard the raw grief in his father's voice, unfiltered and devastating in its honesty. It was a sound he recognized from his own private moments of despair. "I miss her so much," Alex whispered, the admission seeming to break something loose inside him. Sometimes I wake up and for a second, I forget she's gone and then it hits me all over again." "Me too," Ethan said simply, reaching out to place his hand on his son's shoulder. "Every single morning." Alex didn't pull away from the touch. "I've been so angry at you, I thought—" "I know, and I'm so sorry you've been carrying that burden all this time." Ethan moved from the bed to the floor, sitting beside his son. "I haven't been the father you needed since the accident. I've been lost in my own grief, my own guilt." "Guilt?" Alex asked. Ethan took a shuddering breath. "I was driving, Alex. The doctors said nothing could have prevented what happened to the other driver cross the center line at high speed. But I've replayed that moment 1,000 times, wondering if I could have swerved differently, reacted faster, done something to save her, to protect you from being hurt." The confession hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken emotions that had separated father and son for months. "It wasn't your fault," Alex said finally, the words coming slowly, as if each one had to break through a wall of resistance. "Mom would hate that you've been blaming yourself." The simple statement, free from anger or accusation, seemed to release something in Ethan. His shoulders shook as silent tears traced paths down his face. Without a word, Alex reached out, his hand finding his father's arm and then moving up to his shoulder in a gesture of hesitant comfort. Sarah watched as the two Brooks men began the long-delayed process of grieving together rather than apart. The misunderstanding that had driven a wedge between them was dissolving, creating space for a new kind of relationship, one built on shared pain, but also on truth. Eventually, the conversation shifted, becoming more open than perhaps it had ever been. Alex asked questions about his mother that had been bottled up for months. Ethan answered them all, sometimes through tears, sometimes with laughter, as he recalled happy memories. "She would be so proud of you, Alex," Ethan said at one point. "The courage you've shown these past few months, it's extraordinary." "I haven't been brave," Alex countered. "I've been angry and difficult." "Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid or upset," Sarah interjected gently. "It means continuing despite those feelings. And you have continued, Alex. You're learning Braille. You're figuring out how to navigate your world in a new way. That takes immense courage." A soft knock at the door revealed Tommy, his expression concerned. "Is everyone okay? Mrs. Reynolds said I should wait, but I was worried." Sarah smiled at her son's compassion. "Things are better now." Alex and his dad were having an important talk. "Did you work it out?" Tommy asked with typical directness. Alex nodded, a small but genuine smile appearing. "Yeah, I think we did, or we're starting to." "Good," Tommy said decisively, "because I told Mrs. Reynolds we should all have ice cream to make everyone feel better, and she's waiting to know if that's okay." The simple suggestion broke the remaining tension in the room, prompting laughter from all of them. As they made their way downstairs, Sarah noticed that Ethan kept a gentle hand on Alex's shoulder, not guiding but simply connecting, and Alex didn't pull away. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of freshly baked cookies that Mrs. Reynolds had apparently stress-baked while the emotional drama unfolded upstairs. They gathered around the kitchen island rather than the formal dining room, the casual setting matching the new, more authentic atmosphere between them. As Mrs. Reynolds served ice cream with warm cookies, Ethan turned to Sarah. "I can't thank you enough for tonight. You've given us more than just teaching. You've helped us find our way back to each other." Sarah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen's temperature. "You both did the hard work. I just created the space for it to happen." "You've created far more than that," Ethan said softly, his eyes conveying emotions that words couldn't adequately express. Later, as Sarah and Tommy prepared to leave, Alex approached her, his movements more confident than they had been in weeks. "Will you still be my teacher, even after everything tonight?" "Of course," Sarah assured him, "as long as you want me to be." "And can Tommy still come over? Maybe for swimming next time? Dad says we could open the pool this weekend." Tommy's excited yes answered before Sarah could even respond. At the front door, Ethan stood close enough that Sarah could smell the subtle scent of his cologne. Would it be inappropriate to ask you to dinner? Just the two of us, sometime next week? The question sent a flutter of nervous anticipation through her chest. That depends on your intentions, Mr. Brooks, she replied with a small smile. My intentions are entirely honorable, he assured her, a matching smile lighting his features. To thank you properly for everything you've done for my family, and perhaps, he hesitated, suddenly less certain, to explore whatever this is between us, if you're open to that. Sarah considered all the potential complications, professional, boundaries, Tommy's and Alex's feelings, the still fresh grief that Ethan was processing. But she also recognized something rare and valuable in the connection they shared, something worth exploring despite the risks. I'd like that, she said simply. 3 months later, the Brooks mansion was transformed. Gone was the austere showplace, replaced by a home that felt lived in and loved. Family photos now adorned the walls, not just new ones, but cherished images of Claire that had previously been tucked away. Her presence was acknowledged and honored rather than avoided, a healing change for both Brooksmen. In the spacious living room, Alex sat at the piano, his fingers moving confidently over the keys as he played a simple but beautiful melody he had composed himself. At 12, he had returned to school, not his previous prep school but the Perkins School for the Blind, where he was thriving under a curriculum designed for students like him. Tommy sat beside him on the bench, offering occasional suggestions for the composition. Their friendship had deepened over the summer, creating a bond that benefited them both. For Alex, Tommy was a guide to the world of blindness, showing him possibilities rather than limitations. For Tommy, Alex was the older brother he had never had, expanding his horizons with stories of travel, sports, and shared adventures. In the kitchen, Sarah and Ethan worked side by side preparing dinner, their movements reflecting the easy intimacy that had grown between them. Their relationship had developed slowly, mindful of the children's needs and the complex emotions involved, but it had deepened with each passing week, built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and a connection that neither had expected to find. Alex's mobility instructor called today, Ethan mentioned as he chopped vegetables. She says he's ready for the overnight field trip to New York next month. Sarah smiled, remembering the frightened, angry boy who had once refused to leave his room. He's come so far in such a short time. We all have, Ethan replied, setting down, his knife to wrap an arm around her waist. I never imagined we could find our way to happiness again after losing Claire, but here we are. Here we are, Sarah echoed, leaning into his embrace. It hadn't been an easy journey. There had been setbacks along the way. Days when Alex's grief resurfaced with fresh intensity. Moments when Ethan struggled with guilt over finding new love. Times when the complex dynamics of blending their lives created tension. But through it all, they had found a way forward together, creating a new kind of family from the broken pieces of what came before. Later that evening, after dinner had been cleared, and the boys were engrossed in an audiobook from Alex's now extensive collection, Sarah and Ethan sat on the terrace watching the city lights twinkle below them. I have something to ask you, Ethan said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. It's probably too soon, and I'll understand if you want to wait, but these past months have shown me that life is unpredictable and precious, and when you find something worth holding on to, you shouldn't hesitate. Sarah's heart quickened as he reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. This isn't Claire's ring, he said quickly, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond set in white gold. That will always belong to her memory. This is new, like what we're building together. He took her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. Sarah Mitchell, you came into our lives when we were lost in darkness. You showed us a path back to light, back to each other, and ultimately, back to joy. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of making this family we've been building official? Tears blurred Sarah's vision as she looked at the man before her, no longer the distant, grief-stricken father she had first met, but a partner who matched her in strength, compassion, and love for their children. "Yes," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes, I will." Their kiss was interrupted by a whoop of joy from the doorway, where Alex and Tommy stood grinning widely. "Did she say yes?" Alex called out. "She did," Ethan confirmed, laughing as the boys rushed forward to join them. "Does this mean we'll be brothers?" Tommy asked, his face alight with excitement. "It does," Sarah confirmed, drawing her son close. "How do you feel about that?" "It's what I wished for," Tommy confessed. "Every night when you thought I was asleep, I was wishing for us to be a real family." Alex nodded in agreement. "Me too. Well, once I stopped being a total jerk and realized how awesome you guys are." Their honesty brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes as she looked at the three people who had become the center of her world. What had begun as a desperate grasp at financial security had transformed into something far more valuable, a second chance at love, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by shared struggles, and by the courage to begin again after loss. They sat together under the stars. Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. There would be challenges ahead. There always were in any family. But they would face them together with open hearts and the knowledge that even in the darkest times, there was always a path forward into the light. And in that moment, surrounded by love that had been hard-won through pain and perseverance, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that they would be okay. More than okay, they would thrive not despite their wounds but because of them, transformed by the very challenges that had once threatened to break them. In Alex's blindness, they had all learned to see more clearly what truly mattered. In Claire's absence, they had found a way to honor her memory while embracing new beginnings. And in coming together, they had discovered that family wasn't defined by perfect circumstances, but by imperfect people choosing to love each other through life's darkest moments and brightest joys. It was enough. It was everything. Dear listeners, we hope Sarah and Ethan's journey has touched your heart as deeply as it has touched ours. Their story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, new light can find its way in, often from the most unexpected sources. For more stories that explore the resilience of the human spirit and the healing power of connection, we've created a special playlist that you'll find linked to the left of this video. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. We bring you new emotionally rich narratives like this one daily, each exploring the complexity and beauty of human relationships. What challenges have you overcome in your own life? What unexpected connections have helped you find your way back to the light? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.